As we continue to monitor the effects of COVID-19, there still seems to be a lot of confusion around COVID-19 vaccinations. I don't even know why I'm talking about this because I'm just as confused. But the question still remains the same. Can an employer make workplace vaccinations compulsory? How far does the law stretch? To what extent does the law protect employers or employees for that matter? With the birth of this virus that has affected many people based on their economic circumstances or even as far as medical well-being, both physically and mentally, constantly surrounded by depression, anxiety and stress. Then you get the flip side of the coin, which is a vaccine that was developed, and for many people, hope was created, and for others, the vaccine is just a shot of saline solution or something, I don't know. To the general public, the vaccine is not mandatory. Now in the workplace, the situation is quite different, and so many different acts shape and affect the circumstances surrounding this information. You actually get to that stage where you have to weigh up an employee's constitutional rights and employment legislation. So let's take a look at the Constitution, and in particular Section 12, which sets out the right to freedom of security of a person and provides that every person has the right to bodily integrity. So in a nutshell, you and every other person has the right to make decisions about your own health. So much like you choose whether or not to go for chemotherapy or a flu shot and cannot be forced, you have the same right to choose whether to take the vaccine or not. You have to remember though that human rights contained in the Constitution can be limited if there are justifiable grounds for such a limitation. Much like everyone has freedom of speech according to the Constitution, but does that mean that you can explicitly just say what you want to say when you want to say it and there are no repercussions? Of course not, but that's the Constitution. Now, under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, employers have a duty to provide employees with a safe working environment. But this does not only stop at employees. Employers also have a duty to reasonably ensure that third parties such as customers, contractors or suppliers, etc. are not exposed to any hazards relating to their health or safety. The Department of Labour has released directions on occupational health and safety measures in the workplace regarding the COVID-19 virus. Employers had 21 days to submit whether or not they would make vaccinations mandatory or not, which this time has obviously lapsed by now, so we actually don't know whether or not the directive still applies. However, the directive still remains the same and does add value in some direction, being that an employer will have to do a risk assessment to determine whether or not it will make the vaccination of employees mandatory. The decision must be based on operational requirements. And the second part is the employer needs to decide whether or not vaccinations will be compulsory for all employees or only select employees. This is primarily based on assessing the risks associated with the transmission, contraction, age, and comorbidities of all the staff members. Can an employee refuse to take the vaccine? I mean, that's the real question. We've seen a glimpse that it could be possible, but the directives do not provide any guidance on the issue. Despite the employer adopting a mandatory vaccination policy, for example, if an employee refuses to go for the vaccine, the employer must enter into consultations and educate the employee based on the reasons for his or her refusal to take the vaccine. The employer can also refer the employee for further medical evaluation to see whether or not the employee has a medical reason for not taking the vaccine. I'm sure a prognosis from a medical practitioner would suffice in this regard. The employer must always take steps to reasonably accommodate the employee in a position that does not require the employee to be vaccinated, and yet the employee can still remain in employment. I'm referring to remote working or working in isolation at the workplace, or adjusting working hours or adjusting working locations, or simpler things like just adjusting the employee's duties. Although no directives actually exist, it could be accepted that dismissal due to incapacity or operational requirements be used only as a last resort, and once a thorough and reliable risk assessment has been conducted and implemented. The directives are clear that an employer must follow the correct procedure, ensuring fairness when dealing with employees who refuse to take the vaccination. This topic will continue to plague many businesses and employees until such a time that updated laws are implemented or case law guides us in a direction that sheds more light on the way forward. That's all that I have for you today. Until next week, ciao for now.